Welcome back into Sports Memo's Betting Podcast. College football, every game on the board. Section number 3 with Robbie Veno. Rob, welcome into the pod. How are you?
I am good tonight, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm good, Robbie. And the first game up in this section of college football, every game on the board, sportsmemo.com, 167, 168, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Number 1 versus number 2. LSU at Alabama. Robbie, we're seeing anywhere from 5.5 to 6 right now as we're talking. This one in Tuscaloosa, 63.5 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the game of the year, Drew. No doubt about that. It's been much talked about. It'll be even more talked about and dissected. I think a couple of things I find interesting here are, the obvious absence of Michael Divinity, the linebacker for LSU. Perhaps their top pass rusher left the team for personal reasons this week. However, to offset that, I think you have the emergence here of a 100% healthy Grant Delpit at safety. So maybe that's a wash for LSU in the respect that Delpit's multi-purpose safety, good hitter. He'll have to be good in coverage against Alabama. So, they'll feel the loss of Divinity a little bit. In fact, head coach Ed Orgeron goes as far as to say they'll be fine without him. They've got a couple of junior backups that have had action. So we'll see. I'm not so sure that they'll be as fine as he thinks. Alabama might work some crossing routes and shorter stuff that they can get where they can get their receivers in space. But LSU can do the same thing to Alabama. I think neither one of these past defenses, Drew, when you go through their entire schedule, has really been tested and succeeded in that test. The last couple of weeks have been brutal for both of these squads. If you're LSU, the last 2 weeks you faced Bo Nix in Baton Rouge, and Bo Nix has not fared well on the road against any good opponent this year. And then the only other the other team that they faced was Garrett Schrader in Mississippi State, a true freshman quarterback who hasn't thrown the ball very well this year either. So the last 2 weeks haven't been good. The 2 times they faced offenses that could move it through the air, Kyle Trask threw for 311 against them with Florida in that 42-28 game. And Sam Ehlinger threw for 409 way back to the Texas game, which was somewhat of a shootout also. So LSU, just based off of what they've shown us this season, have a little bit of trouble with these high-scoring offenses, especially ones that can throw the football. Alabama, no different, though. Same exact thing can be said for them. Their last 2 games are against Tennessee true freshman Brian Moore, who got concussed and knocked out of the game. And, of course, Tennessee went into their quarterback bag of tricks. And then they played Arkansas with Nick Starkel, who's been an absolutely abysmal all season long. 2 games they played where they faced fairly competent passing offenses. South Carolina threw for 324. Texas A&M and Kellen Mond threw for 264. So I think the ball, in summary, can be moved through the air against both of these teams. I know the defensive coordinators have had a lot of time with the bye week to get ready for this. And Dave Aranda, to me, would rate an edge in that particular category for LSU. But I don't know if you can change what's been going on, Drew. You're certainly not going to change the success of these pass offenses unless you get a pass rush. Alabama might be a hair bit better pass rush-wise. I don't know if it's good enough to lay the amount of points they're asked to lay here. Tua's going to play. We know that. His health probably good enough to be accurate and pretty successful in this game. Numbers tumble down. I agree with it. I think LSU plus points is probably the right side here. But more than that, over 63, you would think or you would know if anybody had said that to you a couple of years ago that they were a little bit cuckoo, 63 total in an LSU-Alabama game. But in this instance, Drew, I think they can make it look a little bit small. We'll see what happens. Maybe LSU and perhaps a little bit on the over here.
Robbie, I want to just ask one follow-up question here. If Tua doesn't play, let's just say, yeah. I'm with you. I think he does as well, but I haven't heard anybody really talk about the fact if he doesn't play. What does that change in your handicap? What do you think the side is, and do you have any opinion here on the total if they go with the backup?
Well, I guess the answer to that, Drew, would have to be what's the odds maker going to adjust to before we can really answer the question. I mean, if we wanted to be proactive and maybe we thought something right now, at 5.5 and 63, and you thought you got a really good inclination that Tua is not going to go, then you probably want to take the 5.5 immediately, because it's not going to be 5.5 if he doesn't go. It's hard to say how much they'll adjust for him. I would think, off of what we've seen, this game could go down as low as 1.5, or probably lose 4 points off of what it is already if he doesn't play. And Mac Jones would be, the guy in that instance. And I don't know that, after watching Mac Jones a couple games, Drew, I don't know that he's as terrible or as much of a drop-off. Let's put it that way. I don't know if there's as much as a drop-off as people might lead you to believe. Tua obviously is an NFL quarterback. Mac Jones is not as of yet. But I'm just saying, from watching his throws, and those receivers get so wide open, sometimes it's hard to miss them. So we would have to see where the adjustment comes, though. For the time being, let's figure out Tua, and I think even with Tua, that 63 to me looks a little bit small. That means we have to get to 34-31 in a real barn burner. And, you could say 34-30 for 64 points, but more common score would be 34-31, and I think that's doable.
I'm glad you said that, Robbie, about where the line would shift to if Tua didn't play, because I was just thinking the same thing as you were talking about the LSU passing defense. Alabama's still going to throw the ball down the field. They actually did so. He looked pretty well doing that in the game that he played. So at that point, I would almost think maybe go back the other way, wait for the move, obviously, and then maybe buy back the other way with Alabama having success throwing the ball, Robbie.
Yeah, I think that could be an obvious, not an obvious, but I think that could be a very good play in that instance, Drew, because they do. When you have the quartet of receivers that Alabama has, Ruggs and Judy and Waddle and all these guys running free all the time, then it's not that difficult to hit them. And LSU hasn't proven to us so far this year that they can handle a good pass team, and especially one with 4 quality receivers like Alabama, and a team that can also run to balance things off. Makes it even tougher. So, like I say, I give Dave Aranda a lean as far as coming up with a defensive game plan goes, because he's so good. But the way these two offenses operate, I just don't know what these teams can do to stop the other. Unless the pass rush gets home. It's got to get home.
All right, Robbie, great breakdown of number 1 versus number 2, LSU at Alabama. Next game up, though, 169-170. Tough follow here. New Mexico State at Ole Miss. Looks like the Rebels laying 28.5, 64 the total.
Yeah, and I think this is a game that Mississippi will be totally tuned into, Drew, because when you're Ole Miss, first year in both new systems, offense and defense, and it's been a little bit of a choppy season, more towards the losing end than the winning end. But when you come to this point, game 9, game 10 of the year, and you've been getting beat up by SEC foes all year long, and you can't get the wins that you want to get, or the amount of wins that you want to get, and then you see New Mexico State staring you in the face, all of a sudden, for offensive players, they always love to pad stats. The offense in this game, John Reese Plumlee, who has been – actually, he played most of the game last week, Drew. They kind of went away from that two-headed quarterback system. Matt Corral was only in for, I think, 6 pass attempts and 3 running plays. So the job really – and it would make sense in a Rich Rod, run-oriented spread offense that he would favor Rice Plumlee. But I think this offense can rack up some numbers here against New Mexico State, who can't stop anybody this year. Interesting to me that New Mexico State in their last game, they're a pass-oriented offense, kind of almost an air raid offense with Josh Adkins at quarterback. But their offense doesn't really work down the field because they don't get enough time to work down the field. They play a lot of short stuff, and good defenses just come up and smother it because New Mexico State has been no threat running the football. Their last game against Georgia Southern before the bye, they actually ran the ball 54 times, which to me I had to look twice. I had to go back to the box score and look again to make sure that was right. 70% of the time they ran the football in that game, which for New Mexico State is way out of character. I don't know. I couldn't find anything to verify that that's a trend of a way that they're going to go now to try and protect the quarterback, but they're not going to make any ground against Mississippi doing it that way. They won't be able to run. Mississippi's defense, they held Auburn to 20 points last week, but they did give up 507 yards. 11 of 13 Auburn drives moved into Mississippi territory. So, the 20 is a little bit misleading. Mississippi played a bend but don't break, but that's Auburn. That's not New Mexico State. This number is high in the 28 and a half. But I think Mississippi can win this game by, something in the vicinity of 49-17. I think they'll have a field day on offense. New Mexico State won't be able to stop Reese Plumlee running the football and their running game overall. And then they'll throw off of that. So for me, this is a game Mississippi's really looking forward to in my mind, and I would play that way. Don't like laying huge numbers, but I would play Ole Miss in that game.
In the total, you think sitting too short too? New Mexico State will be able to punch it in a couple times?
Yeah, I think they're probably good for, 17, Drew.
Yeah.
I mean, 13, 17, in that range. I don't think they'll get any more than that.
Robbie,
especially if they look to run first.
Yeah. Western Kentucky at Arkansas. Next game up, rotation number 171, 172. Seeing 52.5 being the total. Arkansas -1. Always a tricky handicap here, Robbie. Sunbelt at SEC with this short of a number, man. How are you feeling here?
I tell you what, Drew, this is I'm going to use my one pun for the year here, but it's the story within the story. Ty Story, the quarterback for Western Kentucky, comes back to play Arkansas, the school that he transferred from. Mm-hmm. Ty Story had a great game last week, 380 yards throwing the football against FAU. It was by far Western Kentucky's best passing effort of the year. And if you're paying attention to Western Kentucky out there, a team that has made their living off of stern defense all season long is finally starting to move the football. The whole objective this year when they took the field was to try and bring back the Jeff Brom offense and start producing points the way they did during his era at Western Kentucky. Well, the last couple of weeks, the offense has gained 426 and 444 yards. Those are big numbers for a Western Kentucky team that had not moved the ball all season long. So things are clicking. And you know what? One of those games, Drew, was against Marshall and the other against FAU, and they're two of the better teams by CUSA standards. Here you get Arkansas, who's been an absolute defensive mess. But let's start with the fact that they don't know where to go at quarterback, so they're going to turn to the true freshman, John Stephen Jones. He's your starter in this game, so you got a true freshman out there. I'm sure they figure this is the place to get him out there for 60 minutes against a Sunbelt-type team. But the defense, the last 4 weeks, they had a bye week, and since that bye, they played 4 games. They're allowing 502 yards per game. They're being outgained by 243 yards a game. Chad Morris's name is, all over any article you can find, is basically just about being fired at this point in time. I don't know if he can save his job. I don't know that I would fire him, though. I mean, obviously, fan bases in the SEC get crazy.
Yeah, what year is he in, Robbie? Third year?
Only his second year.
Yeah, you can't fire. I mean, we just saw it with Willie Taggart, but I don't agree with it either, man.
Yeah, you have to give him more time. What he inherited from Brett Bielema was totally different than what he runs, and you have to give the guy a couple, at least in my opinion. But that being said, he's on the hot seat for whatever reason, and the defense just hasn't responded. Like I say, the team is being outgained by 243 yards per game last 4 weeks. Last week against Mississippi State, another team with a head coach in Joe Moorhead that's heard rumblings about get rid of this guy. They gave up 640 total yards to MSU, 460 on the ground. I think that the Sunbelt team might be the better team in this game, Drew, to tell you the truth, at least at this point in time as we head toward the end of the season. I think Arkansas is just grinding out to the finish line, still looking for answers, while Western Kentucky seems to have a couple of things on offense solved to go with that defensive front. So for me, WKU probably the play here. Lots of times Sunbelt comes in and they don't really care about playing the SEC too much because they've got bigger fish to fry inside. Or excuse me, it's Conference USA. I keep saying Sunbelt. Conference USA, because they have bigger fish to fry inside their own league. But I think Western Kentucky comes in here and very confident that they can get a victory, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Yeah, great analysis there, Robbie. I didn't read it that way, but Western Kentucky +1 right now in Fayetteville. We got 8 p.m. Eastern kick here. Iowa State at Oklahoma, good one in the Big 12. 14.5 with the Sooners are laying at home, 67 being the total here, Robbie. And interestingly enough, both teams off of a bye And they just lost as double-digit favorites. Not only Oklahoma. Remember, Iowa State last week lost to Oklahoma State at home. Robbie, I'm looking towards the Cyclones, man. I think this team's underrated off of a bye and off of the obvious huge loss there. 14.5. I know a lot of people out there liking Oklahoma. How do you feel?
Yeah, it's why I keep power ratings, Drew, because they keep me grounded. When I think I see stuff with my eyes, I go to the power ratings just to make sure that I'm not too far off base. Power ratings make the game Oklahoma minus 16.5, so it's not that far off what the current price is, because my first inclination is to play Iowa State plus the points. Maybe the biggest reason why you would want to play Iowa State is this fact right here. They haven't lost, or they've lost by 14 points, which is the current spread. I think there's some 14.5s out there too. But they've lost by 14 points one time in their last 34 games. So this team just doesn't get beat by this amount. And that includes Oklahoma. They've covered 3 straight against Oklahoma. And they covered the same type of quarterback. Remember, last year they're chasing Kyler Murray around, but they still covered. The year before that, Baker Mayfield, but they still covered. This year, Jalen Hurts. It's the same thing. So obviously Matt Campbell has a game plan devised to keep his team close in these games against Oklahoma State, or at least within the spread. It's a better offense than most people think. Let me turn to the Oklahoma side real quick here, Drew, just to talk about incentive, because when those college football playoff rankings came out last night, Oklahoma kind of sits at number 9. They're basically written off by most at this point in time. But when you look at the 8 teams ahead of them, with the exception of Clemson, I would say that 7 of those 8, well, number one, either they will lose because they're going to play each other, or they could lose because they have huge games on deck. So all might not be lost for Oklahoma. And Lincoln Riley kind of hinted toward that this week in an article saying, we know what lies for us in our future. So they have to win out. They have to win their conference championship. They need help. But the help, there's a certain probability there that the help could happen. Some of it will, some of it could. We'll see how it goes for Oklahoma. But I do think they'll have incentive to play this game and to play hard against Iowa State. I also noticed this, Drew. The KSU game was crazy for Oklahoma, the loss that you referred to. Kansas State punted on their first drive of the game, and after that, they scored 48 points on their next 8 possessions. Now, it sounds like, and to an extent, the defense did revert back to old times for Oklahoma. However, 5 of those 8 scoring drives were 46 yards or less. A lot of it was due to Oklahoma setting up K-State in, point-blank situations where they could score. Whether or not Iowa State gets those same deflected pass interceptions with big returns or whatever, it remains to be seen. But all of that being said, if I were to choose here, I think I would still like the points, even though the power ratings say Oklahoma's a couple better. This line still may move a little bit because, like you say, money has come on the Oklahoma side. But for me, Matt Campbell's shown 3 years straight that he can hang with Oklahoma teams every bit as good as this one, and I wouldn't be surprised if he hangs in again here.
Robbie, next game up in Conference USA, UAB at Southern Miss. This is actually a good one in this conference. -4.5, -5. That's Southern Miss laying at home. 50.5 the total here, Robbie.
Yeah, I'm going to be with Southern Miss, Drew. I said it last week. UAB, heading into the Tennessee game, had played the worst opposing power rating schedule in the country, according to my numbers. And I just got scared by laying 13 with Tennessee. Tennessee's playing better ball, but I guess I needed to see it one more week before I could believe it with the Volunteers. But they beat UAB 30-7, not by 13, by 23. And it kind of proved the point that Alabama Birmingham has feasted off of extremely weak competition all season long. And now they're going to face a passing attack led by Jack Abraham that I think could light them up. Alabama Birmingham, to me, does not have much of an offense, despite what they may have put up against some of these patsies that they played up until Tennessee last week. They won't get held to 7 like they did against Tennessee, but I don't know that they can go stride for stride with Southern Miss. In fact, I rather doubt that they can go stride for stride with Southern Miss because they can strike extremely quickly, and this is not one of those high-flying offenses that give Southern Miss trouble. Southern Miss, when they're faced with a pedestrian-style team, can definitely do their job on the defensive side. So for me, it'll be Southern Miss until UAB proves me wrong. But right now, I'm in kind of a fade UAB type of situation.
Robbie, heading to the Sun Belt, we got Georgia Southern at Troy. Looks like 56 the total, -2.5 or -3. That's Georgia Southern laying on the highway.
Yeah, Georgia Southern, Drew, what a game against Appalachian State last Thursday, right? They've had extra time to prepare for this. That game was obviously hindered a little bit by the rain. It was heavy rain all game long, and Appalachian State just couldn't seem to get their offense in gear. But Georgia Southern had a ton to do with that. They ran the football right down Appalachian State's throat, and Appalachian State had played very, very good defense for about 5 weeks in a row. After stumbling a little bit early season, they came around, played very, very good. And then Georgia Southern just handed off to Wesley Fields and let Shai Wertz run as a quarterback, and they were ripping runs off all game long. They had to hang on for dear life because eventually the Mountaineers came up with a couple of scoring drives in the fourth quarter and almost got there. But that was an impressive win out of Georgia Southern. I think that's what a lot of people were expecting out of them for the entire season. It's a huge contrast in styles here because Troy with Caleb Barker will throw the football downfield. I don't know that Georgia Southern's equipped on a good field to stop that. Obviously, Appalachian State, like I say, had the disability of playing on the rain-soaked field, but they're more balanced. Troy is really turned to the air for almost all of their yardage this year. And I think that's a good way to attack Georgia Southern because I don't think they have enough of a pass rush to affect that. But on the other side, Troy's defense is a sieve. And if Georgia Southern controls clock, eats up long drives, they're going to be in real good shape in this game. So it's a fascinating contrast between the two. I don't know that I have a preferred side here, Drew. I really don't. But I will say this. Georgia Southern, considering what I just said about them maybe running the football, and not maybe, probably, most likely running the football successfully and grinding out clock, it may not be a clock grinding situation because against Troy, multiple runs here might go for 30 yards, 40 yards. We saw them rip off big runs against Appalachian State. They could score quicker than you think against a defense like this. So maybe I'm still looking into it, but maybe an overplay because I think you get some of that value in the line because it is Georgia Southern.
Yeah.
So if they could score quicker on their drives, then I think that you could find your way over the total.
Yeah, Robbie, I'm with you. I like the analysis a lot, man, and especially if Georgia Southern's, that triple option is running well because Troy, I'm with you. Their quarterback Barker, he's pretty good. I think they'll be able to score. So, yeah, maybe looking towards the over there of 56. Robbie, we got SEC East rivalry of sorts, 41.5 the total here. Talking Tennessee at Kentucky, -1. That's the Wildcats laying in Lexington.
Yeah, tough for me right now, Drew, to come up with the right way to play this. I think Tennessee has hit their stride. I don't think that's, going out on a limb or telling anybody listening something that they didn't already know. Tennessee's playing better ball right now. They're a talented team that, for a long time under Jeremy Pruitt here has not found any traction, but suddenly they found traction. The one thing that makes me cautious about playing them on the road against Kentucky, who I know for a fact will give me 60 minutes of effort. No doubt about it, whether it's Lynn Bowden running that Wildcat or whatever. They're a grinder-type team. They're going to give me 60 minutes. But the thing that holds me back with Tennessee is I don't want to lay too much emphasis on that 30-7 win last week against UAB because, as I said earlier, I don't think much of UAB, or at least not as much as maybe the value or the power ratings that are assigned to them would indicate that amount of respect. I don't know that I give them that amount of respect right now. So the victory, while it was really good and it was 10 points more than the asking price, it's not Kentucky and it's not at home and it's an SEC East game. So for me, I probably stay off this game because I think Tennessee at this point in time could be the better team, but I can't be positive of that because that win last week, I'm not going to put too much into that against UAB. I think Kentucky, they just seem to do things, Drew, just enough to win games, whether it's offensively or defensively. I think I would leave this one alone. And obviously that total in modern-day college football, you just can't play under 41.5 with any confidence in any of these games. So I would probably leave that alone as well.
All right, Robbie, we got a couple games left. We're up against it a little bit, but Missouri at Georgia up next. Looks like the Bulldogs laying 16 between the hedges, 48 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, we can make this one really quick, Drew, because obviously a lot of Mizzou depends on Kelly Bryant. I mean, even if he plays, how healthy is he against that type of defense? Georgia really got themselves back in gear last week against the Florida Gators, and now may close the season extremely strong. I just have a feeling that what we were expecting from Georgia all season long, and, you know, when a team doesn't meet expectations, when a team like Georgia isn't scoring 49 points a week like we think they should, you get down on them pretty quick. But last week was a real good game against Florida. Those were two good teams. Georgia came out on top on a neutral. Missouri's trending downward. On the road, they've been horrendous. And they couldn't beat the likes of Vanderbilt or Kentucky or Wyoming on the road. So how are you going to go on the road with a banged-up Kelly Bryant and beat Georgia? They won't beat them. The question becomes, can they come within 16? And I just don't know, Drew. I wouldn't bank on that. I think the right way here is Georgia. Gut feeling, proactiveness tells me that Georgia should be a play on the rest of the season. I think Kirby Smart's got his team. That bye probably came at a real good time for them, and I think they're ready to close this thing strong.
Robbie, Kansas State at Texas up next. Longhorns -7 at home, 58 the total.
Yeah, for KSU, you know, they've been pretty good. They still don't totally wow you, but I don't think that a Chris Kleiman North Dakota State style of team would necessarily wow you, because they do things in a traditional way. They like to run the football, and they like to play solid defense. There's nothing really fascinating about the way they run offense. Texas, certainly they can run offense. The question for me is, can KSU take their show on the road here? They did it at Mississippi State early in the season when nobody expected. In fact, that game was in this same price range. But I think we've come to see exactly what Mississippi State is. All that being said, Texas seems to be on a little bit of a decline here. Their defense, which has been so banged up all season long, starting with the secondary and then running through all three levels, is still banged up. And I think that's problematic for them. Kansas State is one of those teams that if you allow them to hang around, they may not just hang around. They may come back and beat you. So I wouldn't lay 7 here with Texas. I think where the Texas Longhorns are concerned, they've shown us all season long they can move the football, get into the end zone. They can't prevent the other team from moving the football. So even as slow-paced as Kansas State might be, I think they probably get over the total here, Drew. I mean, last week, coming off of the big win against Oklahoma and then going out and demolishing Kansas, in-state rival, I mean, they got up immediately after that game against Oklahoma. You would think there could have been some letdown, but not for the in-state rival. KU had been flying offensively. Kansas State shut them down. I think Texas is going to get theirs here because they get them on everybody. But to me, that total has a lot of KSU offense padded into it, and you should play that one over the total.
All right, Robbie, next 2 games up, I'll throw them both at you. North Texas at Louisiana Tech. We got Louisiana Tech -5.5 at Ruston, and Georgia State at Louisiana Monroe, with Georgia State laying 2.5 on the road, 76 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, real quick on the first one, Louisiana Tech is by far the better team. North Texas is a team that can, well, they can't even really bully. They did bully last week a weaker opponent, but they've been caught in some games against middling teams where they were lucky to get out alive. I like Louisiana Tech a lot in that game. The Georgia State UL Monroe contest, the total at 75.5. My only way to play that game, Drew, was going to be over. 75.5 is still a lot of points, and I'd have to reconsider at that price. It opened 73, moved up here. You have to go through the key numbers in the 70s to see where this might come out. 42.35 gets you there at 77. Maybe some value, but Georgia State's been really good. Louisiana Monroe can move the football. I don't know that I could play either way here. Georgia State is a favorite on the road. better team, but I'm not sure I want to lay the points against UL Monroe.
He's Robbie Veno. He's 54-34, 61% since September 12th in college football. That's 61% since September 12th. Good numbers there. Get his 7-day all access for just $59 using coupon code VENO59. That's Veno59. Sportsmemo.com 7-day all access package. Robbie, best of luck this weekend. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk with you NFL every game on the board.
You got it, buddy. Thanks for having me, Drew.